The Jalen Green breakout is finally here. He just dropped 42 against the Wizards. He had 37 a couple of nights ago as well. He's averaging over 23 points per game after the All-Star break, and this is massive for the Houston Rockets. But is it legit? Is this a for real breakout for Jalen Green, or just some post-All-Star break inflated stats? Now, to be clear, I hope that this is real, and this would be huge for Houston because they've got all these different pieces on this roster. They brought in Van Fleet in the offseason. They brought in Dillon Brooks in the offseason, Jabari Smith and Ben Thompson. These guys are really good, complementary pieces that are going to continue to grow and improve over the next couple of seasons. Alperen Sengun has turned into their best player on the team this season before getting hurt, but they still need a more explosive backcourt presence, and they need to get value out of a guy that they picked second overall, that they thought was extremely talented, that they had really high hopes for, that also, by the way, at the trade deadline, they had legitimate discussions about trading away Jalen Green, and he has definitely had, I would say, a disappointing first few seasons in the league relative to expectations, just because that explosiveness, that creativity, that excitement hasn't really been there for him. He's been pretty inefficient. He's been a high-volume three-point shooter, but not an efficient three-point shooter, and if he's able to develop into what they thought he was going to be when they drafted him, and there's starting to be signs that he will, that is massive for the future of this Rockets team, because that allows them to potentially move on from some of these veterans like Van Fleet or Brooks down the road. Potentially, it allows Jabari Smith and Ben Thompson to grow into roles that I think more so fit their games as really high-level complementary pieces. And then you start to have someone that looks like a franchise cornerstone in Jalen Green. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, right? Because the real question is this legit? Is this a real scoring bump? Has he really developed into this kind of a guy? And is he gonna be this next year as well? Because earlier in the season and throughout his career, things have just looked really rough for him at times, especially from an efficiency standpoint. It looked like a classic example of a guy that got a lot of opportunities to continue to be this main offensive weapon because he was a former highly drafted player. And we see this all the time where teams pick a guy that they have high expectations for and they don't perform super well, but they continue to give them a lot of opportunities just to make sure that they were wrong, just to make sure that they really do need to move on from the guy. And it kind of felt like that was the direction we were going here a little bit with Jalen Green, because given his efficiency, especially from three-point range, it didn't really make sense for him to continue to get as many opportunities as he was this season as well as the last couple of years. But now all of a sudden, post All-Star break, he has figured it out. And the main thing, of course, that this all revolves around is him hitting threes. He's always been a super high-volume three-point shooter, one of the most high-volume three-point shooters we have in the league. But unfortunately for him, for most of his career, he's been more on the Jordan Poole level of three-point shooting efficiency in terms of volume and really low efficiency. And that's just not where you want to be. Pre-All-Star break, you're shooting 30% from three. Post-All-Star break, shooting 38% from three. And of course, it's a small sample size. Guys can get hot over a few week stretch, and maybe that's what's happening here with Jalen Green. But that just opens up everything for him because he takes a ton of jumpers and especially pull-up threes, which is one of the most valuable offensive weapons that you can have as a guard in the NBA right now. And you can tell that that is something that Jalen Green has worked on and wants to be part of his game. He wants to be a pull-up three-point shooter, especially out of ball screens. And that's something that has been really working for him lately. You can see in all these highlights against the Wizards, 42, 37-point games, this is a lot of jump shots. If you're going to take this many, you've got to be a really, really good jump shooter, especially three-point shooter. And then it allows Jalen Green to get to the rim, get to some of these creative finishes. He's improved as a playmaker as well. And that's just going to open up everything for him. Post All-Star break numbers, especially for young players, especially for young, formerly highly drafted players, not always indicative of future success. This is something that I've talked about in the past on other channels. I've dubbed it the Josh Jackson effect, because when you look at Josh Jackson's career numbers, pre-All-Star break, he looks like an absolute nobody. And post-All-Star break, he starts averaging like 15 points per game. The first couple of seasons in the league for him, he was much better post-All-Star break. And of course, we know that Josh Jackson just didn't end up being a good NBA player, especially offensively, despite having some really good stretches post-All-Star break. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. It's one of the reasons why I may be concerned that this might not be legit for Jalen Green. Post-All-Star break, a couple of things happen around the league. One, even the good teams start to not really care nearly as much about their regular season performance. They're just trying to be healthy. They're resting a ton of guys. The effort level just is not as high post-All-Star break because a lot of teams are already locked into what their fate is going to be, whether it be they're not going to make the playoffs or they're going to be a high seed. And so you end up having not only teams that aren't putting in as much energy and as much effort on a night-to-night basis, especially defensively, but also you're having guys out there that normally wouldn't be playing. There's a lot of G League players out there this time of the year. There's a lot of guys that are, like Jalen Green, that are getting a ton of opportunities that maybe aren't the best defenders, because it's the end of the year and teams want to kind of see what they have in some of these, potentially explosive offensive players. And a lot of times it can lead to deceiving numbers post All-Star break, especially, like I said, for guys that are former highly drafted players that teams want to make sure that they are right or wrong about, and they want to give a lot of opportunities to. Now, the counter to all of that for Jalen Green is two things. One, generally speaking, scoring is down in the league right now. I've talked about this in other videos. Rules have changed. They've changed the way that they're calling games. And so an uptick in scoring for Jalen Green, while there's a downtick in scoring for the league as a whole, is definitely a good sign, and definitely kind of helps stave away this narrative of this just being post All-Star break stuff. And also, Houston is good. They're still very much in the play-in race. They're trying to chase the Warriors to try and get into the play-in even after the injury to Şengün. And it's not like they're those Suns teams that Josh Jackson was on that were winning 20 games and they're just trying to, throw possessions at their young guys. They're still trying to win games, and he's playing extremely well as a part of it. So all of this to me is incredibly interesting to watch down the stretch of the year, because if Jalen Green is this guy, let's just say that he finishes the year like this, and then next year he's a 22 point per game guy shooting 37% from three on high volume. Him and Şengün together, with the complementary pieces that Houston has, with the future assets that Houston has, is a really, really dangerous combination in the Western Conference. And right now, the piece that they're missing, as evidenced by how they invested in the offseason, getting VanVleet, getting Dillon Brooks, the piece that they felt like they were missing was that backcourt creator, was that guy alongside Şengün that could create for them. Even though defensively, Jalen Green, Şengün, not the best defensive lineup of all time, those two guys together offensively, when Jalen Green's playing like this, is going to be a really dangerous combination. And so as we finish the season, potentially go into the postseason for Houston, and then into next year, this is one of the biggest storylines I'm going to be watching and paying attention to, because this is an inflection point right now for the future of Houston Rockets basketball. Is Jalen Green going to be just like a six-man kind of scorer for them in the future? Is he going to be a trade asset for them in the future? Or is he going to be able to sustain this level of production? And this breakout is real, and we've suddenly got a really, really exciting, not only young player in Houston, but young team in Houston moving forward. That's probably the case regardless of what happens with Jalen Green, because he certainly has value potentially in a trade, even if this isn't legit for them and he isn't a actual future piece for them. But this just elevates things to a completely new level. It's realistic. It's definitely possible that this is all just fake. He's an explosive athlete and a great player. And a really high volume shooter, and when you start making shots, sometimes it's easy to make yourself look like a much better player than you actually are. But I'm kind of leaning in the direction that this is legit for him. There's a confidence level with him right now that is just very high. Obviously, without Şengün out there, it's even more difficult for him to find open opportunities and him to score. And yes, the competition level maybe isn't fantastic. I'm sure a lot of players could probably put up 35 or 40 points against the Wizards right now, but still, it's one thing to say, oh, well, it's just post All-Star break numbers, but it's another to have all these factors kind of in the favor of Jalen Green, of a downtick in scoring across the league while his scoring is up. They're still trying to fight for the play-in game. There's overall numbers that look really good. It's not just higher shot volume, it's higher shot efficiency for him as well. And all these pieces just kind of point towards this potentially being a real legit breakout for Jalen Green.